aka Speed Bullet, and this is the Speed Bullet podcast channel. Don't forget to like if you like these types of videos and you want us to keep this thing going. Don't forget to subscribe. Subscribing gives you access to all of our latest videos and anything that's going on with the channel. Don't forget to share this content with anybody that you feel as though might be someone that finds some value in these types of conversations and might want to participate. So what I want to talk about today is going to be slavery, reparations, and the case for and against what what we call reparations for slavery and the descendants of slavery. So the reason why I'm having this conversation is really because there's been newfound energy or awareness, or however you want to call it, about reparations for the descendants of slaves and how that looks, whether or not that's something that's viable, whether or not that's something that the country itself can stomach, whether or not it is something that is actually owed to black people and the descendants of slavery. So I think the first thing that we need to kind of get an understanding and an idea of is what is reparations, and a real kind of simple and basic definition for reparation is going to be some type of acknowledgement of a wrongdoing committed by others. So other or others. So it's a very, very simple concept. There's a wrong, and in an effort to try to make this wrong right, you can ask for and receive reparations. In the United States, we kind of call it like suing. I mean, we all kind of understand the basic concept of something happens, there's some wrong, and there's a way to recover what that wrong is, depending on how the affected party feels like they want to be made whole. I mean, sometimes that is as simple as an apology, and sometimes it is some type of monetary award, to that person, and sometimes the descendants of those people. So a reparation can take many forms. So I don't want people to think that because the wording that is used is reparation, that is something that is obscure or something that doesn't really happen. So it doesn't need to be taken seriously. It's simply the act of recovering some type of loss, and how you recover that type of loss, and how the affected party feels as though they can some way become whole, through the party that has wronged them in some kind of way. So I mean, I think in California there has been some energy recently about reparations for slavery and the descendants of slavery. So this is not something that is not something that's out of the mainstream, not a conversation that's not had amongst people. So I figure this is something that we need to talk about, because it's one of the most controversial topics that you have here in the United States, and obviously very divisive. A lot of times the conversation becomes more so political, and what party you kind of support normally has very, very strong views either for or against reparations. But before we even get into the case for reparations, and whether or not African Americans, the descendants of slavery, should indeed receive reparations, I think we want to just kind of look at what's happened throughout the globe, and some examples of reparations that other groups throughout the globe has actually fought for and won. But I think the first thing that we want to talk about is reparations that have happened here within the United States. And there are really two big cases of reparations that the United States government has paid out for those who were wronged. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is just the Japanese internment in World War II. So World War II, there was obviously a war, the biggest war that the world has ever seen. And there, the United States on the side of, the Allied side, they, fought against the Germans, and the Italians and the Japanese. So when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and now we are at direct war with the Japanese, one of the things that happened was the United States government and United States military started to round up all Japanese people and put them into essentially internment camps. These camps were to separate them from society because it was uh, it was a thought that these Americans, would be loyal or sympathetic to the Japanese government and would, in some ways, try to carry out attacks within the United States border. So lock these people up, put these people in camps with terrible conditions, and and uh, kept them there, for months until the war ended. A horrible experience for those folks who were involved, and for the children of those folks who carry that 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 event, that horrible tragedy on to this day. Now that happened in 1940s, right? So you want to fast forward to 1988, and you have the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and that was really spearheaded by Congressman Norman Mineta, who was a survivor of a Japanese internment camp. And with this Civil Liberties Act, it introduced a bill, created a ceremony, and also um, recognized that the 20 to 80,000 people who were forced into these camps, and monetary monetary compensation was given to these Japanese who were forced into these camps. So that happened maybe almost 40 something years after these people were in these camps, and they were given these types of compensation from the American government. So something that I point to when folks say things like reparations are just have never happened and there is no historical precedence. Well, we have one from this century, but an event that happened, and years later there was some type of repairing of harm as a result of this event. The next thing I want to talk about is the Native Americans, or Indians, as a lot of people refer to them as, but the Native Americans, and the extreme and long felt tragedies of what happened with the Native Americans and the settlers and the United States government and the forced movement of natives and the taking of native lands, and all of these things that were absolutely terrible. So the Indian Claims Commission was created in 1946, and I think through 1978. And its appointees were appointed by the sitting president at those times, and it gave money, upwards of $1.3 billion, to compensate those Native Americans who were taken from their land. The United States didn't give back land. However, they did set aside over $1 billion, to give to those who were affected by the government's taking of Native American lands. And like I said, that was through 1946 to 1978. And when you think about the earliest settlers came here in the 1400s, and they absolutely did terrible things to the Native Americans. Took their land, killed them purposefully, infected them with disease, anything that you can name. The treatment of the Native Americans is absolutely horrible and terrible. And the United States government did recognize that those horrors needed to have been repaired in some kind of way. Obviously, the United States ain't giving back no land, but obviously, just an acknowledgement, and then to be able to give money to that group, to give that group the ability to invest those funds, is a step in the right direction of repairing the harm that was caused to the Native Americans. But to continue with with that theme of Native Americans, in 1971, $962 million worth of Alaskan land, about 44 million acres, was set aside, for the Native Americans who were forced out of their lands in Alaska. It was given not directly to people, but in it was given to regional and tribal corporations to be able to disperse these funds and these lands to the natives of that area. Once again, to repair a historical wrong of these folks being pushed out of their lands, and these folks receiving some type of just some type of reparation for what had happened to them. I mean, so I think that when people think of like the biggest groups that were harmed, not just by citizens, but by the actual government, outside of African Americans, is Native Americans and the Japanese during the internment period during World War II. Those are the two major groups that were harmed, that that everyone universally says that the treatment of these folks was terrible. The treatment of these folks were harmful. The United States government tried to make amends and tried to repair some of this harm. Next thing I want to talk about is the obvious one of reparations throughout the larger world outside the United States, and that's Germany after World War II. We all know that Germany tried to perform systematic genocide of approximately 6 million Jews, commonly referred to as the Holocaust. And after World War II, the German reparations program was created, and it gave billions of dollars to Israel, which then became a country, and individuals. This was through the Luxembourg Accords in 1952. And to this day, there is reparations being paid by Germany to Israel because of the treatment of the Jews during the Holocaust. So that's a pretty large example throughout the world of reparations being given to a group within their actual country. Those Jews were citizens in Germany, so the responsibility falls on the German government, and that there were reparations paid to that group and continue to be paid to that group. The last one I want to talk about is South Africa. So South Africa, we all know, was the birthplace of the apartheid system, the system of racist double standards for non-whites in South Africa, where there were rules, regulations similar to the Jim Crow South, where black South Africans were pretty much forced into forced to be a permanent second-class group within South Africa. And in 1994, after apartheid was ended, all those those policies that the government had in place to keep the black Africans down, those were destroyed. So now it was time for the South African government, to heal some of those wrongs, and they created something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that put just a national and international spotlight on the human rights abuses that were in South Africa for years, and folks testified of the treatment that they got, and they were awarded monetary settlements as a way to repair some of the historical wrongs over there in South Africa. So now we go to American slavery, and I'll tell you, I can just give you the facts about what happened after American slavery and what I feel as though what should be done about the question of reparations. But when people think of reparations, they think of black people. The first thing they think of is 40 acres and a mule. And most people think, well, what is that? Where did that come from? And what does it mean? So within the black community, what it means is a continued kind of recognition of the promises that was made and then broken by the federal government after slavery. So the period after slavery, you have Reconstruction, where there was supposed to be, just a new order, a new way of doing things. The country was supposed to be reconstructed into something new, and where this famous kind of phrase came from was from General William T. Sherman, who is credited with making this statement. It was a part of his Special Field Order Number 15. So many people may say, well, what is the origin? Where did this come from, and why do people bring this up? But what is the source of this, really like historical and often used phrase by Black people? So Sherman, he was a Union general, and he met with the Secretary of War, Edward M. Stanton, who met with about 20 Black leaders in Georgia. And one of the things that Sherman wanted to do in creating this kind of commission of Black leaders, and he had really two main kind of points that he was trying to make. The first thing was he wanted to weaken the morale and the financial stronghold of the Southern landowners, and by giving the freed Blacks and the Blacks that fought on the Union side, by giving them by giving them 40 acres, this would be a way to be able to to be able to kind of bridge that gap, but to be able to weaken the like I said, moral and financial stronghold of the Southern landowners. Also, to provide for the millions of newly emancipated Black people who either followed the Union into battle or who were set free by the Emancipation Proclamation. So giving those Black people and the ability to to have land and to be able to be self-sufficient. The actual text is broken into 7 parts with three pretty key takeaways. One, there was highlighted land in this field order that will be set aside for newly freed Blacks. Number 2 is this land was supposed to be governed and run by Black people. And number 3, the plots that were set aside was about 40,000 acres were seized. And what was promised is they would give each slave up to 40 acres of this 400,000 seized acres of land. And lastly, Sherman offered the army, would lend a mule to any of these new settlers. So there is the kind of history behind the 40 acres and a mule. This field order was immediately approved by Abraham Lincoln, but after Lincoln was assassinated, it was quickly overturned by Andrew Johnson, who was someone that was a sympathizer of the plantation owners, and the 40 acres and a mule thing ended up being over from that moment. So that's what people mostly point to when they say reparations were already promised and then taken away. So there is a case, and there was a case that even directly after slavery, there was an understanding that there would be some type of reparation for Black people, but that was shot down pretty quickly. So the question that most people say is, what's up with reparations today, and why is it something that we should even be having a conversation about? So the first thing that people normally bring up is the amount of time that's went by. So slavery ended 1865. Here it is, 2024. There hasn't been any reparations to any degree so far, and all of the people who were slave owners, all of the slaves are all dead and gone. So is there really something to be repaired because all of these folks are gone? So that's a legitimate question. That's a legitimate stance and take that a lot of people have. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I'll tell you why. I think that the institution of slavery went beyond just the actual act of slavery. It went into every cultural, economic system within the United States was built on oppressing black people, and that did not end after slavery. If anything, that oppression became much more defined and more refined, in the sense of you started things like the prison industrial complex. You know, black people being locked up. You had Jim Crow. You know, where you had an apartheid like system in the South where you were not allowed to vote. You were not allowed to own land. You were not allowed to own firearms. You were not allowed the basic rights that every citizen should have. But also, you weren't even allowed to look at a white person. You weren't even allowed to really walk on the same side of the street as a white person. And you know, the fear and the horror and the terror was everywhere for all blacks in the South. Like no one was safe, and that is the reason why reparations, you know, that there was a case for reparations right after slavery, but I think the case for reparations actually became stronger after slavery. I kind of believe that. I mean, I'm pretty much on board with. I'm pretty much on board with. There are no more slaves. There are no more slave owners. So I almost think that group has kind of nullified itself. But if the oppression stopped at slavery, then that would be a different story. And we all are aware of the continued oppression, you know, through slavery. I mean, the continued oppression after slavery is really where the reparations idea really should expand upon. That there should be conversation of, you know, things in terms of you know, back pay, wages, things of that nature for, you know, for slaves and their descendants. That is a conversation. But also, what has the United States done, you know, the 150, 60 years after slavery? You know, from 1865 to 1965, black people barely had rights. Black people barely had any ability to have social movement, physical movement, and to live without fear. I mean, black people were just terrorized all throughout the country, and most people think that this was just a Southern thing, that these lynchings and these things were just things that happened down South, where you know, it's been documented that up north, blacks received a lot of the same abuses. It may have not been as frequent, and it may have not been as defined as within you know, the southern region, but black people certainly experience all types of discrimination in the north as well as the south. The reason why the federal government is responsible for reparations is because it is the government's job. It is the government's duty to protect the rights and the liberties of its people. Now, if you want to say that the slaves weren't people, I get it. I'll kind of give you that one. You want to say that slaves weren't people? You want to say that you know, whatever kind of laws were going on in the United States back then, that you can't hold people to, you know, to those laws. I'll somewhat concede that point. But when you go outside of 1865 and you go through Reconstruction, and then you start to focus on you start to focus on the civil rights movement, you start to focus on the Jim Crow era, then you realize that the effects of slavery, the lingering effects of slavery, went beyond the Emancipation Proclamation. And the federal government, it was and is the federal government's responsibility to protect those rights. And the federal government was implicit in allowing these tragedies to happen towards black people. The federal government, when I say, government in general, not just the federal government, but government in general, starting at the local, state, and federal, were implicit in allowing these tragedies to happen to black people. You know, to continuously allow these tragedies to happen to black people. And the justice system, the criminal justice system, and that's why I say the entire government is responsible, you know, for these protections, and they were implicit in allowing these things to happen. From the local police, which is a function of government, from the local police all the way up through judges, Supreme Court, all of these folks within government, not only not only limited black people's ability to, to protect themselves, but empowered all of the other, all of the other states, all the other, local governments to institute these things that stop black people from, from really having any rights and any ability. So, to me, that is where I think that the blame falls in with the government. That it was the government's job. Now, some people might say it's actually not the government's job to protect your rights. I know some people who are, Second Amendment folks that are like, you know, a well regulated militia, blah blah blah, stuff like that. So, but one of the things that the government did to limit black people's ability to actually protect themselves and to protect them rights is to make sure that black people were not allowed to carry firearms. That black people were not allowed to have guns in a home. So they have no ability to protect themselves. So if you're not going to, as the government, if you're not going to protect us, and you are not going to allow us to protect ourselves, then you are absolutely implicit in what happens with the citizens, in reference to any of these dealings with black people. So that is the basic reason why I feel like reparations, are owed to black people, just because of the continuous treatment of black people throughout history, and the lack of acknowledgement, the lack of repair that black people have ever gotten, from the United States. I think that there is absolutely a case for reparations. So let me know what you guys feel about the reparations conversation. Are you guys for it? Do you guys feel like black people are owed reparations and that it should be paid in some kind of way? How do you think that it should be paid? Do you think that it should be it should be money to each black person? Do you think that it should be, trust funds? Do you think that the government should set aside these programs specifically for black people, so black people can, reap some of these benefits that they have not been, able to utilize throughout history? What do you guys think? How do you think that these how do you think that reparations should be should be given to black people? And if you don't agree, then let me know why. Like, why do you feel like black people are not deserving of the same types of reparations that other groups have gotten historically throughout the United States and throughout history? So I'm gonna leave you guys at that. Don't forget I'm gonna leave you guys there, but don't forget to like. If you like this type of video, you like this type of conversation, don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. If this is the type of conversation that you want to jump in, become a part of, don't forget to subscribe. You'll have access to all of our latest things that we drop. You'll get a notification. You'll know when we're on. Don't forget to share this information, share this channel with anybody that might be interested, that might want to be a part of this conversation, might want to subscribe to the channel, see what we're all about. So I'm gonna leave you guys at that. I'll talk to you later.